Ciao everyone and welcome to episode 21 of Voices of Italy Beyond la Dolce Vita. Today we are not talking about a cliché or something that Italy is particularly known for, but instead we talk about an aspect of Italian culture that is maybe unexpected for foreigners and, in my opinion, ignored even by most Italians. I'm referring to Italian style customer service. Sure, Italy has a global reputation for warmth, big smiles, and a relaxed, welcoming vibe. But does that really extend to every aspect of Italian culture, including customer service? Let's just say, don't expect to find a cheerful chef named Luigi to greet you at the door of every restaurant or waiters who treat you like a member of their family. In this episode, I'll tell you why Italian customer service isn't always the greatest and why sometimes it reveals the grumpier side of La Dolce Vita. Italy is one of the most iconic countries in the world. But what does Italy mean to the world? What does it mean to you?
Buongiorno.
Pizza,
Ciao Bella.
Michelangelo.
spaghetti,
Mafia.
Dolce Vita.
My name is Alessia, I'm Italian, and this is Voices of Italy, the podcast that peels back the layers of the Instagram perfect Italy to reveal everyday stories of authentic, surprising, and messy Italian life. Let's start with saying that this episode is based on my unpopular opinion that customer service in Italy isn't the greatest. Okay, I said it. It's out there now, so please don't cancel me. Fellow Italians, don't hate me. I can explain. Did you ever feel like you were bothering someone just by ordering a coffee at the bar? If you're Italian, or if you live in Italy, or if you have been in Italy before, I bet you probably did. I'm not trying to be a hater here, okay? But this is like a big elephant in the room to me for anyone experiencing customer service while in Italy. And in particular, if you're more familiar with US style customer service standards, because that's what we're talking about. I mean, what's okay, rude, and what's very good, like what are the standards? Where's the line? And no, of course, I'm not saying that customer service is bad across the board everywhere in Italy. That's something that I would never say by about anything in any place. Definitely when it comes to big companies and customer service in the sense of call center, customer service in the form of, chat or national phone numbers, that kind of thing. In that case, I think I feel even more confident that I have to say maybe it's consistently bad. But when it comes to, small businesses, varies definitely a lot more because obviously it depends on the person that you're talking to, whoever the workers and whatever, however things work on that individual level. That could be very welcoming and at times treat you like more than just a paying customer, like almost as you're a guest in my home. And other times they might treat you as if they were straight up annoyed at you for just being there in the room, and like just making me work. So no, I'm not saying that you cannot find any cute little trattoria places where the owner is going to treat you like a visiting family member and offer you, I don't know, off the menu shots or little treats from the kitchen. But that's probably honestly more of an exception than the rule, definitely. But let's start with the basics here. What are we talking? It's all about how we classify, in a way, good customer service and bad customer service, right? So that's a little bit more of the point because when you talk to, I don't know, your Italian friends and family or just Italians in general, they definitely might have a different opinion than what I'm saying right now. There's saying that there's absolutely nothing wrong with Italian customer service, that in average everybody's really nice, or that, maybe what I refer to as good customer service is too demanding of an expectation. I guess those are the two reactions that I might expect from other fellow Italians. And again, that's probably because their standards are set on Italian service, and so their parameters might be just different than yours or mine. And I have to say, I also had a different idea, different expectation, different standard of, what's good customer service until relatively recent times, in the sense that I also used to not to think nothing much of it, that what I knew, my experience with customer service was okay. Obviously, that was for me the standard. So obviously, traveling, seeing other places, seeing other cultures, that definitely helped changing my opinion. So, but still, I think something about that I can say about myself is that I am particularly open. I'm really person that is fascinated with finding out differences between cultures, because I think it's being different is what makes us fascinating as a human civilization. But again, in this case, I think it's sort of opened my eyes a little bit. So this means that my expectations or the expectations of non-Italians coming here might differ from, the average level that things work. And obviously, I'm also talking from a perspective that I think makes me a little more objective, because not only I'm Italian, of course, born and raised here, but not only, of course, I've bought things in my life. I've been in restaurants, so I have experienced customer service from a customer point of view, but also I've been on the other side. I worked before in a jewelry store as a sales clerk. I also worked in customer service in a call center. My family, like, they're all business owners selling stuff, so I definitely know what it means to be on the side of the business serving people, whether it's your company or whether you're just a little employee in a store. I definitely can say that I have that perspective as well, so that's why I'm just a little more aware, maybe, that certain stereotypes or ideas that Italians have about how customer service is supposed to be, sometimes it's a little justified, sometimes a little less. But let's cut to the chase and let's see what I'm talking about concretely. So, what's the standard here? What's good and what's bad? All I can do to kind of try to explain to you what I'm talking about is making examples. Usually, you shouldn't take one or two cases as representative of everything, but come on, guys, this is a podcast. What do you want me to do? I would start the first thing when I talk about this topic, and yes, I've talked about this topic before, both with Italians and non Italians, because it's one of those things that to me, it's so obvious about our culture, and that somehow we don't seem to be very aware of, that it kind of surprises me. So again, I've had conversations about this before to see what people's idea is. And usually foreigners kind of see the point, while Italians might see the point eventually, after I've made examples and I've explained in details what I mean. Eventually, then maybe they say, "Yeah, I kind of see your point." Or still, even after hearing what I have to say, they tell me that, "Yeah, but that's fine. Maybe the expectation is just wrong." I've had that kind of response as well. But let's take a very very simple kind of case scenario, going to a restaurant. I think something that I've always taken for granted, growing up, is that the job of the waiter in particular is kind of representative of that service industry, especially in a very tourism driven country like Italy. I was just reading the other day that Italy is one of the countries in Europe with the highest amount of hours worked in the weekend, because again, our economy is so much driven by small service businesses. So we have, I guess, this general idea of working we say, in contact with the public, to say again, in a client kind of facing function. And in particular, the job of the waiter is one of those jobs that you go and look for examples of problems, in our job market. So maybe not being so well paid, working overtime, being very stressed. And again, in particular, something that all service jobs seems to have in our mind as Italians is that yeah, it's a very difficult job. It's annoying. People are annoying. You work all day for not much of anything. So again, going to the example of going to a restaurant, I guess something that I realized only recently, the expectation that maybe you cannot have is choosing your own table unless the restaurant is like completely empty. The expectation on the other side of the restaurant could be that I'll tell you where to sit according to how it's more convenient for me, how I'm organizing my place essentially. And I can even give you a little example story of what I mean right now. When I first met my boyfriend, it was a few years ago, and he was having his first trip here in Italy, and we were at this little Argentinian restaurant, and we were out for lunch at the earlier side of lunch hours. So the place was basically empty. If you ever been here in Italy, if you're Italian, we have lunch kind of late compared to other countries. Like 12 noon is as early as it can be. There are other countries where if you want to have lunch at 11:30, you can probably find already restaurants open. That's not necessarily the case here in Italy. So again, the place was almost empty. So we chose our table and we sit. What looks like the restaurant owner, an older man, you can tell the difference when someone is the owner of the place or just a manager. He came to us asking if we could move to a different table. And in particular, the table that he was pointing at was honestly a spot that just like that didn't give me a good vibe at where I didn't want to sit. It was really close to a corner, and it was just definitely not in the nicest area of the street because I'm talking about outdoor tables here. There was even like a drain, a storm drain kind of thing nearby that I don't know, just didn't give me the best I want to sit there vibe. And back then, my boyfriend didn't used to speak a lot of Italian, so the guy was essentially speaking directly to me. And I mean, he's basically telling me, "Oh, look, I'd like you to move to this other table because the one where you have seated is close to some other tables that I could put together if a group." Comes in a group of clients, I can easily put it there. This is an explanation that honestly I've also heard other times going out in restaurants. And when I explained this to my boyfriend, who again didn't speak Italian very well back then, he just found it crazy. The idea that you're making two paying customers move to a table that clearly don't like as much because potentially in the future another group of customers might come in. And that was one of the first things that stick with me, that I was how can I say, really ready to accommodate immediately, while someone that is not used to that kind of request might almost take it as rude, because again, I don't see what the problem is with this, but in any case I'm a paying customer. So, I guess the expectation from my boyfriend's side was that I'm a paying customer, and this is literally your job to make me feel welcome and to give me a service. And I didn't see it like that at all. In my mind, the reaction was, I guess I see the point. I see how it could be annoying if a group comes and you have enough tables but you just cannot put them together, so preferably you want to, I really immediately kind of went and addressed what his problem was instead of my kind of desire as a customer. Again, coming from a family that owns a business wasn't something new for me to hear. The idea in general that I've always had in my mind was that handling a business is already very difficult in Italy. It's one of those things that you almost a martyr in society, from a tax paying point of view, and all other series of considerations that, yeah, it's kind of tough to own a business, and people make it even more tough. So, that's kind of the idea almost that I grew up with. And just to be clear, here I'm trying to talk about, what's the most common surface kind of service that you can experience, because I honestly will not even refer to more high level luxury restaurants. That's just, I guess, their own world. It wouldn't really reflect the reality that I'm referring to. But in general, food and drinks industry, restaurant, bars, clubs, that kind of thing is, I guess, where you can see a little more. Obviously, not just that, stores, etc. I'm also referring to stuff like, people not saying hi when you get in, or people just answering you with, I don't know, yes and no kind of answer, monosyllabic kind of answers, or having this feeling that they're kind of annoyed at you almost. You can see it in their face, or you can see it in the tone of voice that they have. I have always found that okay. Like, it wasn't even a negative thing to me. It was just something, honestly, that I'm used to. And I find it a little difficult at times to explain it, because I think a lot of people's reactions, or at least Italian people's reactions at times, when I talk about this, has been, well, what are you expecting? Are you really expecting everybody at a store, at a restaurant, or everything like that to kind of smile at you and to give you that kind of nice, cordial welcome? That's more like a fantasy. That's more like a movie, or that's more like luxury level kind of places. So is that really what you're expecting? I used to think a little more like that. And after seeing a different kind of service, I have to say here, I'm especially referring to the kind of service that I experienced when I have been in the US. And it kind of dawned on me that, oh, look at that. It's possible. It's not just that utopic, it's real. And it was really surprising for me to have that kind of experience. It's a big difference though, and here I have to go in defense of my fellow Italian people working in the service industry, is tips culture, and in general working culture in Italy. That's, I think, a big factor explaining what I'm talking about. And for example, in the US, tips culture is something that it's a bit complained of on the customer side of things, but it's undeniably very common that for a lot of people in the service industry, that's a big part of what they get, and that's absolutely non-existing in Italy. Tips are just not a thing. If you don't know this, you will probably notice first time you try to give someone a tip in any store or restaurant in Italy. It's something that just doesn't happen. So, let alone being expected. And obviously, that's an incentive that Italian workers don't have. If providing a good service in when tips are a thing, it's definitely and undeniably motivation to work better, to be more efficient, to be nicer. So that's definitely something that Italian workers don't have. And the reason why I was mentioning in general more Italy definitely lacks not only employee engagement, really our work culture tends to lack any sort of recognition, any sort of promotion. Is kind of something that we generally, again, not in every case, not in every company, not every employer, but generally is now part very commonly of our work culture. So even just being praised or being promoted for doing a good job, especially, I have to say, in jobs like service industry jobs, you just don't have that. It's jobs where, unfortunately, employers are usually very demanding of your time. And if anything, they really like take advantage, especially as I have often talked about here on Voices of Italy, of labor laws that allow you to easily get new stuff for very little money with internships and short term contracts and collaboration along those lines. So that's really something that definitely does not contribute to give you the motivation and the ambition to work better and, go the extra mile to, be very welcoming when you're serving people or accommodating people with requests, or again, finding the motivation to be a good server in that kind of job, because there's very often really nothing to gain. You're not going to get a promotion. You're probably not going to get a permanent contract. You're probably just going to be replaced. So I completely understand that there are a lot less advantages and a lot less reasons for that kind of work attitude. And I think that's something that Italians are very aware of. As I was saying before, I definitely think that jobs like being a waiter or a shop clerk or in, I don't know, grocery store work or all that, those kind of public facing jobs are usually considered difficult. They require a lot of patience and they probably don't pay you a lot. So I think there's a lot of empathy, a lot of understanding towards people who are not at their best, who they don't really offer that great of a service. Because, I get you, you work in that kind of job. I completely see where you come from. I think there's a lot of that from Italians, which I respect in a way. Like it's something that I guess makes us, highlights a little bit of that solidarity. Okay, I get you. I'm not expecting you to be here welcoming with a smile because you probably don't even get enough to pay for your rent with whatever you're doing. Also, in Italy, being a shop assistant, a sales clerk, a waiter isn't always seen as a temporary or student job. So there's not even that kind of, well, at least it's a job that you will do for just a little time, even if you considered it so bad. It's something that you might do just for a few months when you're trying to cover for your studies or something. That's really not the case. It's honestly usually a long term profession, again, especially in retail or food industry and stuff like that, because the job market in Italy kind of makes it that way. Like in my case, as I was saying, my very very first job was actually I was a sales assistant in a jewelry store, and back then I was also hired with a stage, like an Italian internship contract. So the company was paying a lot less taxes because of that format. And people that can be hired with that kind of contract, specifically, I'm referring to my case, but it's very, very, very commonly used by lots of companies. It's a contract that is made for people that have ended their studies for less than the 12 months. So people who just got people who just graduated, like people that were just students. And so, as I was saying, it's kind of an internship contract, and there's a lot of tax advantages for employers. That's why it's so common. And I remember back then I worked at that store with a 6 months contract, again, very common. And I think I was successful. The manager liked my work, but at the end they straight up told me, look, it's been 12 months now since your degree, so we don't want to pay for more taxes just to keep you, so we're gonna get another intern. And that's a lot, like really a copy paste of what happens in so many stores. And here I'm really referring to both small businesses, big chains. It's just so easy. You don't really have to justify anything like that. And even preparing a learning program, because again, it's supposed to be a post graduation stage. So it's supposed to be something that extends the learning experience of your studies a little, but more than a learning program, it's in any way just a full time job in most cases, really. I think I've never seen someone doing a stage where the main goal of their experience was them learning, because that's a little bit what's the debate most of the time here in Italy. Like employers tend to support the idea that that's a learning experience and that any salary, any payment should be just nothing more than a refund of the cost that students or graduates have to pay, for example, commuting. But if you see at how those contracts are really used, you see that they are in any way just full-time jobs paid very little. And going back to the role of the waiter, of the sales clerk, any retail kind of job or client-facing job like that, they a lot of times tend to be people's long-term career. And that's why also I think, yes, I guess people have a little less tolerance. It's not really like you have the patience or the ambition, like you have the patience or the hope to say, at least I'm going to do that just as a temporary kind of income situation, but that's very often not the case. But really, the worst that you can see when it comes to customer service in Italy, I have to say, is anything related to call centers, phone number support, chat support, all that. And yeah, I'm a little more confident that that's where you can see consistently bad customer service and recurring problems. First of all, even just being able to reach out to customer service in Italy sometimes is challenging. Here I'm referring to really everything across the board. It could be from, I don't know, calling an office, a public office of your city hall, to calling your phone company's number, to your electricity provider's number, that kind of thing. A lot of times, even being able to reach the point where you're talking to a human, it's already challenging. And when you finally get to speak with somebody, a lot of times, to be honest, they just do the bare minimum that they need to do to kind of get your request out of the way. And you can feel it. You can feel it from their voice, the way they answer, the fact that depending on how many times you have the patience to call, you could get a number of different answers that don't help you for whatever your problem is. And I don't think I'm exaggerating. Please, Italians and people having this kind of experiences in Italy, tell me if I'm exaggerating. But I don't think that I've been just particularly unlucky in my life. It's one of those chat topics that I've never heard people kind of praising a phone customer service in my entire life. And here too, I can say that I have kind of a direct experience because, as I was saying, I also work in a call center for an insurance company before, and I have to say that it helped me understand a little tiny bit why people, for example, providing customer service over the phone might be a little impatient, because it's really easy, maybe because of the distance. I guess the fact that it's not, an in-person facing kind of assistance over the phone, people tend to be a little more rude. People tend to be a little more demanding. They're probably home on their phone and chatting, and they're not in front of your face. So I guess that might make it a little easier, maybe also for people to be more impatient and slightly more rude. I'm not saying that I condone or justify, workers being unprofessional over the phone, because that's not what I'm saying. But I definitely can see where that comes from. And at the same time, I think it kind of makes me, on the one hand, I think it makes me more empathetic. I don't know how many times I've talked over the phone with customer service, and they were like trying to justify with me why they couldn't give me the information that I needed. And I'm like, I understand. A lot of times, customer service, it's nothing more than honestly giving a way to clients to have someone to call, a number to call, and like having the impression that you have some sort of response from the company. Because a lot of times, and I guess bigger companies even more so, the reality is that customer service cannot do much for you, cannot access to that. Oh, sorry, I cannot provide that kind of service over the phone, because simply that's just not what they offer. So a lot of time, the person that you're talking to over the phone is really, in a way, powerless to fix your problem, because they're not even given the kind of authorization levels of that kind of power, and autonomy. And that's where my empathy, my experience comes in, because that's exactly what it was. For me, people were calling and expecting, I don't know, to get their insurance renewed over the phone or their plan changed or certain information even being provided and consultation being provided. But the truth is that already, for example, in my case, it was an insurance being over the phone. There's a lot of privacy issues here involved since I cannot verify who you are. And people would get really mad at me for not being able to do that. But baseline, there's only a very short, I guess, limit of things that customer service can generally tell you or do for you. And in Italy, I guess it's also that the expectation is not there. If, for example, I'm outraged and I'm calling a certain company because I'm experiencing a disservice and or some sort of inefficiency, you don't necessarily hear, I'm sorry, on the other end of the phone. You don't necessarily hear someone trying to take care of a problem. I don't know how many times I've called for this kind of issues, that kind of really daily life things that you would expect if there's a phone number, a service because I need help with something. I'm definitely not calling for fun or to buy something most of the time. So you would expect to have that kind of function at least, and it's really unfortunately very often not the case. I've only seen differences more recently, or at least improvements in terms of quality of the service when it comes to call centers where the operators maybe receive some sort of a review, or maybe they even tell you, please reply to a call that you will receive shortly after this one, because that's where you're allowed to give a vote to your experience, to leave a review of your experience with me. So those are the only cases where maybe I even noticed that the operator was being particularly nice and efficient, and then in the end that was it. That was how and in the end they asked me to leave them a good review. But it definitely happens a little less often. And actually, I have a little story about phone customer service as well. That's something that happened really recently. As I've mentioned before, I worked for an international company and I work in HR, so I'm really not involved in the main side of the business. But in this particular occasion, I was helping out a German colleague that worked on a project here in Italy. And she was supposed to travel here and she had shipped something from Germany that she would have needed then. It was an item essential for her to complete her project once she arrived in Italy. Problem was the shipping, the tracking just stopped. And essentially, the tracking was showing that the item seemed to have arrived city where she shipped it, but then it just stopped there and in the was just not updating essentially for days. And she did some research, the customer service of the shipping company, and not only that, she found the phone number essentially of the facility where she thought in that moment the item was stored. But unfortunately, she couldn't talk to anybody on both numbers because the initial number of the shipping company didn't have any options in English and she doesn't speak Italian. And when she called the facility directly, she obviously tried to ask questions in English. And the funny thing is that the person there answered just hung up on her. When she told me that, my first reaction wasn't that it was a mistake and there probably was a problem with the call. My first thought is that that facilities clerk probably just hung up on her the moment she heard a sound in English. I'm very sure of that. That's exactly what happened. But long story short, she asked me to call to find out what was happening with her shipping. And when I called, of course, they answered immediately and I was able to start a dialogue. So I was like, I'm calling because I'm looking for a package. This is the tracking number. We don't know what's happening. Please tell us. The answer I got, and I'm not kidding, the only answer I got was, we're really overworked right now. That was the only thing that she told me. And I was like, I completely understand, but does it mean that you lost it? When is it gonna be delivered? And essentially with a lot of and blah blah, she was trying to tell me that she doesn't know. I insisted a little bit, and in, I have to say, very Italian style, I added a little bit drama and I said that it was particularly urgent and that we needed this item as soon as possible. And so her response at that point, after insisting a little bit, was that she was gonna, quote, send a print for the item to be delivered the next day. If you're wondering what send a print means, welcome to the club, because I didn't know what that means either. She was using, I suppose, some sort of an internal jargon of her job. To which I really, at that point, since we had been at the phone for a while already, and I still didn't know if I could get that thing delivered, I was like, do you realize that I don't know what send a print means? That do you mean that this thing is going to be delivered tomorrow? To which she just answered yes. At that point, the problem seemed fixed. It looked like she had found the package and that she sort of gave instructions to whoever's job it is to deliver it the next day. At that point, I honestly warned my colleague that that's what they told me, but it wasn't necessarily the truth, and that I felt like they were kind of trying to get rid of me a little bit. But I was right in my defense to make her, to warn her a little bit about what that meant, because in the end, my colleague actually offered to go herself directly at the facility to pick up the package because they didn't seem to be able to tell me when that thing was going to be delivered. They are overworked and they had absolutely no clue when that situation was going to change, despite the delivery already being late at that point when I was calling. And obviously, I left her name. I told her it's a German girl and this, and that. I really made it as easy as possible. The next day, she told me she went there to pick the thing up, and still the person that was there didn't know what she was talking about. And she had to ask for another customer that was there to help her a little bit understanding the situation. So, obviously, in this particular example, English makes things even more complicated because, yeah, very easily, English is not a language that people can help you with. But not necessarily that's the case. I feel like, especially that feeling of, oh, they want to kind of get rid of you because as a customer, your very presence there is annoying and making their job a little more complicated than what it needs to be, doesn't necessarily have anything to do with speaking a different language. And a simple example actually comes to my mind. It's something really recent and it's really silly, but I think it delivers the idea really well. I was at my usual kind of grocery store where I go more often to do my main weekly grocery shopping. And so this is just to tell you that I'm familiar with the place and the workers, and know more or less how things work there. So at this store where you go and pay and you're let's say you're lining up to for the checkout, and at a certain point you have to choose if you want to go with the normal checkout with the clerk, or if you choose those automatic checkouts kind of things, and you pass your own stuff at the cash register, you handle your own payment, etc. That day I had kind of abundant grocery. It was one of those days where I just had more stuff, and so I was heading for the automatic cash register because you can just take a little bit more of your time, especially when you have more stuff versus when the clerk is helping you with the payment. You always have that kind of feeling that they are rushing you, that you have to hurry up because there's the next customer right there next to you. And yes, they do that before you haven't even finished paying. They already make the next person, come to pay next. And I'm not kidding. This is something that it's so common that I'm telling you, it's such a common meme in the Italian internet that, you're paying for your shopping and the store clerk is kind of passing your stuff so fast that you don't even have the time to put them in the bags and you need to hurry up because the next person is there, and it's this kind of situation all over again every time you go buy your stuff. And that's why I usually prefer the no clerk register. That day, I don't know why, maybe because there was more people around and in their mind there was a little bit more chaos. The store workers just tells me to not to go to the automatic register because I have so much stuff that I run the risk to pass stuff twice and to have double of my stuff registered and paid for. Now, this could make sense for someone that has never been in the real world and has never seen how you kind of pay and do the checkout at the store. And I swear that's what she was trying to tell me. Don't even expect me to kind of try to explain it again. I know that it might sound like a small little thing. It's just that I remember it kind of made me laugh almost a little bit like, what are you saying? I know how to use it. It's not that complicated. I don't think I'm gonna make that mistake just because I have a lot of stuff. But I at the same time immediately understood that she just wanted me to get away from there. So obviously I didn't stay there and say anything. In my mind, again, immediately I thought that she was just trying to get rid of me. And that's kind of a feeling that unfortunately you get to have sometimes in stores. And to kind of start leading to the end of this episode, actually, I wanna, take a little step back here with actually a happy ending and a good story because if essentially what I'm trying to say here is that Italian customer service is very, very often very, very different from maybe the warmth and welcoming kind of expectation that you might have or idea that you might have about Italian service. On the other hand, obviously there are good experiences. And just this morning, having breakfast outside, and actually I went to a new place around here in Turin serving donuts. And I have to really give big, big praises to the commessa. That's how I would call her in Italian. I think that's the term that we would simply use in Italian. It refers to any essentially retail and service kind of job, like a shop assistant or sales clerk. But in whatever way you call it in English, very often the term that encapsulates that is commesso and commessa. So in this case, I have to give a big, 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 big praise to this commessa because she was really so nice and welcoming, offered solutions that were not indicated on the menu. And she looked really, really super motivated and nice. And she really went the extra mile to make us feel welcome there. Her name is Thea. So thank you so much, Thea. You made my day and you gave me the opportunity to end this episode with a really nice story of Italians that do it better. And as always, I want to hear from you guys. What's your experience with customer service in Italy as a local, as a tourist, or as someone who's lived abroad and came back here? I'm really curious to hear what you think. If you think that I'm a little bit too picky, or if you completely see my point. You can send me a message on Instagram at Voices of Italy. You can comment in the post or just tag the podcast at Voices of Italy. I always reply and I'm always really happy to hear from you guys. If you like this episode, follow the podcast and leave a review because, as you know, it helps really a lot. Grazie mille and I'll see you in the next episode.